Here's the English translation of the Vietnamese transcript, with character names changed and promotional non-dialogue elements removed. Hey everyone, Jeff here. It's a cold night, and I've received a very special letter. The sender claims to be a doctor at a psychiatric hospital, a place where, according to him, horrific things happen daily under the guise of treatment. The letter was sent from an anonymous email address, signed only as Dr. Alistair. I don't know if this story is real or not, but the details in it are too vivid to be fictional. You all can judge for yourselves after you hear me read this letter. To the show, I am a psychiatrist who has worked for many years at a specialized treatment facility. I'm writing this letter to tell you about a patient I can never forget. Chloe Davison, a patient in Ward B. The girl sitting across from me was trying her best not to look at my face. Her eyes darted around the small, dreary room, desperately searching for something to fixate on while I examined her. The only sounds piercing the heavy silence were the faint ticking of a clock in the hallway and the occasional mumble from the recreation room. After a while, she began to bite her pinky fingernail very hard. "Ms. Davison," I gently began. Her blue eyes, too large and wide for her slender face, flickered towards me for a moment before deliberately fixing on a spot on the wall. "When you're ready, I want you to answer my questions." She took a long breath, then exhaled a whisper, her breath trembling in her tired chest. "Yes, Dr. Alistair," she finally replied. Her voice was monotone and soft. "Have you been eating what the nurses tell you to?" I smiled, and she looked at me warily. "Good, Chloe," I paused. "Do you mind if I call you Chloe?" She shrugged, and through her black t-shirt, I could see her shoulder blades protruding as she moved. Her collarbones were like a pair of daggers jutting from the base of her neck, and her limbs were thin and delicate like a young fawn. But fortunately, she was a little fuller than the panicked, blood-soaked, skeletal Chloe we admitted 2 weeks prior. The one whose spine protruded against her pale skin like a row of razor blades. "You seem to be making progress," I added, adjusting my glasses and making some notes. She looked down at the floor sadly. "If progress means getting fat," she mumbled, "then yes, I'm making progress." "Chloe, perhaps you mind if I call you Chloe?" She interrupted abruptly, her face contorted. I smiled politely. "I respect that. However, Ms. Davison, fat isn't a word we use here. You're unwell and you're here to get healthy. Health isn't necessarily tied to a number. It simply depends on your body functioning normally and your ability to accept yourself, both inside and out." She looked up at me, and for a moment I thought I saw tears in her eyes. "But what if I can't stop eating?" she whispered, blinking rapidly until the tears receded. She raised her hands to cover her mouth and squeezed her eyes shut, taking deep, shaky breaths through her fingers to calm herself. "I can't think about it," she said softly, her voice muffled behind her hands. I continued the conversation, and gradually Chloe began to tell her story. She spoke of high school, of becoming beautiful and noticed, of how she developed extreme dieting habits. She told me about Ethan, her gorgeous roommate who wanted her to model for his fashion collection. And then the story turned dark. "The leather pants," Chloe said, her face pale. "They were made from black leather that Ethan had spent a lot of money on. The way he talked about them, it was like his masterpiece, and they were amazing, but they wouldn't fit over my thighs." She looked at me, eyes brimming with tears. "You should have seen his face. He couldn't widen the seams. He barely had enough leather to finish the pants. He was so disappointed, and he said he could find another girl to wear them. But I felt so bad, so I said I would lose weight." "How much did you weigh then?" "About 90 to 95 pounds. She pinched her thigh as she spoke. "Still very underweight for my height, the pants must have been unbelievably small." But Chloe didn't stop. She used ADHD medication to curb her hunger. She fasted, she worked out frantically, obsessing over measurements. Thighs 19 inches, waist 22 inches, hips 32 inches. Those were the numbers I chanted while exercising. She fainted at the gym. She was down to 88 pounds, but it still wasn't enough. "And on the night of the show," she sobbed, tears streaming down her cheeks, "I was still an inch short. One more inch to be perfect, and I was out of time." Her lips suddenly stretched into a wide smile, and I frowned. "Mom was peeling potatoes," she giggled, eyes wide, "for dinner with a potato peeler. And I found it so fascinating how the blade slid under the skin and stripped it all off, like sculpting marble. All the parts she didn't need went into the trash where they belonged. It was the perfect tool. I could watch the potato get smaller and smaller. Tears flooded her face, but the terrifyingly wide smile remained fixed. So I took a very sharp knife and a tape measure before I left for the show. "I think I know what's going to happen," I said quickly. I felt a cold sweat on the back of my neck. She laughed again. "Yes, I'm sure you do. I bought bandages at the pharmacy near where Ethan's show was so no one would see what I did. And when I tried on the pants, they fit. They fit perfectly. And everyone backstage was thrilled. I even got a few business cards. People wanted to hire me. Ethan was so excited. He kept saying we'd be the stars of the show, and we were supposed to be." Her eyes widened further. "Everything went so well until the model behind me slipped on something and fell, and that's when they saw the blood. The bandages must have started to bleed through." The smile vanished, and she cried hysterically. I felt my face turn pale. The rest of the therapy session passed in tears and pain. As I left the room, I stopped to tell the nurse to check Chloe's legs. I believed she was picking at her wounds again. She was the first patient I wanted to tell you about. But Chloe isn't the worst case in Ward B. There are 3 more, and each carries its own terrifying story. Chloe's story reminds me that sometimes the most terrifying monsters don't come from outside, but from within our own minds. Social pressure, the obsession with beauty. They can transform people into something unrecognizable. I wonder how Chloe is doing now and what stories the 3 other patients in Ward B carry. Do you want to hear more? Let me know. For now, it's late, and I think we should stop here. I'll catch you after this short break. And remember, sometimes stripping away the outer layer doesn't always help us find the beauty within. Jeff here again, and tonight I continue with part 2 of the Mysterious Doctor's Letter series. This time, the story revolves around a woman named Jessica Davenport who shot and killed her boyfriend. But the reasons, you'll have to judge for yourselves whether to believe them or not. I received this email with a short message. Sometimes we see truths that others cannot. That doesn't mean we're crazy. All right, let's continue listening. To the show, my second patient has a story that makes me question the line between sanity and madness. I waited patiently, feeling a little awkward as the young woman before me knelt by her bed, her back to me, elbows resting on the mattress, hands clasped together, looking like a little girl praying before bed. After a moment, she bowed her head and made the sign of the cross, then slowly stood up. When she caught my eye, her lips curved into a serene smile. "Hello, doctor," she said cheerfully, lowering herself onto the mattress and sitting cross-legged. Her long hair fell over one shoulder in a neat, sleek braid, and she exuded a pleasant warmth. "Time for therapy, isn't it?" I smiled back and sat down in the chair near the bed. Usually, when it came to the first big meeting, my patients were as tense as piano wires. But Jessica Davenport seemed ready to float right off the bed. I had never seen a woman so comfortable just 2 days after being admitted to a psychiatric institute. "Is now a good time?" "Now or any time, really," she replied, stretching languidly. "It's not like I have urgent plans." "I didn't realize you were Christian," I admitted. Observing her closely, I hadn't seen her at the Sunday morning prayer group. She shrugged, a slow, graceful movement that conveyed nothing but complete relaxation. "I'm not religious." I raised an eyebrow. "Then why?" "Because what happened to me was enough to convince me that someone up there is watching over me," she answered fluidly. "Since arriving here, I've made it my goal to praise every deity I can think of to give thanks. It's the least I can do." "Every deity?" "That's right. God, Allah, the pagan gods and goddesses," she said with a slight smile. "I'd like to pray to the Hindu gods too, but I suppose that'll have to wait until I'm discharged. I don't know the mantras." "I see. We can arrange something," I replied slowly. "Now, what happened to you? You're referring to the incident that led to your admission here." "Yes," she sighed, one hand idly toying with her long blonde braid. "I suppose that's what you want to talk about with me." "If you're ready." She closed her eyes and exhaled, then nodded. "Where should I begin?" "Wherever you believe the beginning is." "All right." She cleared her throat and opened her eyes. Her gaze was slightly unsettling, filled with certainty and unwavering resolve. "It all started with Damien, of course, and Damien is the man I shot and killed. Yes." Jessica recounted her relationship, which was initially perfect. Damien was a polite gentleman. but gradually, he became possessive and controlling. She realized she was drifting away from her friends. Damien texted constantly when she went out, and then came the fateful night with the football jersey stained with red wine. "Pennywise," she narrated. "I spilled wine on his favorite football jersey. It wasn't a big stain, but there were many tiny red droplets on it. Was it that valuable?" "Oh, I don't know," she sighed, waving her hand impatiently. "I don't follow sports, but to Damien, it was as if I'd just ruined his entire world. I apologized over and over, but he just got angrier and angrier until he snatched the wine glass and threw it as hard as he could, grazing my face and hitting the wall. It shattered just a few centimeters from us." She shook her head as she described Damien apologizing, crying, hugging, and kissing her. "And then, when he pulled away to look at me, I realized Damien had changed. She paused, and I leaned in closer. "Sorry, this is the first time I've told anyone about this." "Doctor-patient confidentiality, Jessica. I assure you, you can tell me everything." "Okay," she tensed her shoulders as she spoke. It was his eyes. Yes, they had turned yellow, like an owl's eyes or something. I tried to keep my face expressionless while she observed me, trying to gauge my